I'm Lorraine Mitchell. I'm 68 years old, and if a lifetime of drafting blueprints and inspecting structural integrity has taught me anything, it's that the most catastrophic collapses don't happen because of a storm. They happen because the foundation was cracked before the first beam was ever raised. I gave my daughter and her husband access to a fund worth over $5 million, intended to feed the hungry and house the homeless. In return, they handed me a pamphlet full of corporate buzzwords and a knife in the back. They thought they were dealing with a retired old woman who was too busy tending her garden to notice the math didn't add up. They didn't know that I still hold the original architectural plans to the very building they were using as their headquarters. By tomorrow morning, their luxury cars will be repossessed, their reputations will be condemned, and I will be the one striking the match. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The mid-morning sun cut through the patio umbrella at the garden terrace, casting a checkered shadow across the white tablecloth. It was the kind of place where a cup of coffee cost $8 and the waiters looked like they were auditioning for a modeling gig. Across from me, my daughter Vanessa was practically vibrating with energy. She had her tablet propped up against the sugar dispenser, scrolling through charts that looked impressive, but meant absolutely nothing to me without the raw data. "Mom, you're not listening to the potential here," Vanessa said, tapping the screen with a manicured nail. Orion Dynamics isn't just a sponsor. They are a partner, a strategic ally. If we lock them in for the vocational training initiative, we are talking about tripling our outreach in the tri-state area within 18 months. I took a slow sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm. Orion Dynamics, I repeated, testing the weight of the name. They're defense contractors, aren't they? Why would they be interested in a local charity focused on soup kitchens and job placement for single mothers? Vanessa didn't miss a beat. She had always been quick on her feet, a trait she inherited from her father, Thomas. That's the beauty of it. It's part of their new corporate responsibility pivot. They want to soften their image. They need good PR and we need capital. It's a symbiotic relationship. She swiped to a new page. But here's the bottleneck. Their legal department is notoriously slow. They've agreed to the $2 million grant, but they won't release the first tranche until we demonstrate a liquidity reserve of $50,000. It's a solvency test, just a box to check. I looked at her. At 40, she still looked like the little girl who used to steal my drafting pencils and draw houses on my blueprints, but her eyes were different now. They were harder, more calculated, or maybe that was just the reflection of the city skyline in her glasses. $50,000, I said. The foundation has reserves. Why do you need a personal check from me? Because the reserves are tied up in the bond market until next quarter, she explained, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. If we liquidate now, we lose the yield. Mom, I just need a bridge. 30 days. Once the Orion money hits, I wire it right back to your personal account. No harm, no foul. But if we miss this window, Orion walks. They have a short list of charities, and we aren't the only ones hungry for funding. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was cool. Dad would have wanted this. This is the kind of swing he always told us to take. Imagine the legacy, the Thomas Mitchell Vocational Center, funded by a Fortune 500 company. That was the hook. She knew exactly where the weak point in my armor was. It wasn't greed and it wasn't ego. It was Thomas. Even 5 years after his passing, the mere mention of his name could make me suspend my better judgment. I pulled my checkbook out of my purse. I uncapped my pen. 30 days, Vanessa. I have property taxes coming up on the lake house. 30 days, I promise. She beamed, the tension leaving her shoulders instantly. You're saving the day, Mom. Again. I wrote the check. I tore it out with a crisp, ripping sound that felt final. As I handed it to her, I felt a strange, subtle vibration in my gut. In architectural terms, it was the tremor you feel in a floor joist right before a support beam snaps. I ignored it. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that my daughter was building something, not just taking something apart. A week later, the tremor came back. I was over at Vanessa's house for a Sunday brunch. Her husband Marcus was setting the table on the patio. Marcus was a man who treated life like a game where he had stacked the deck. He was smooth, polished, and constantly checking his phone for market updates. "Lorraine," he called out, gesturing to the spread. "Help yourself. Everything's organic. Imported berries, artisan pastries, only the best for the family." I walked over to the table. The patio had been redone since I was last here. Imported Italian tile, if I wasn't mistaken. Expensive. Business must be good. "Marcus," I said, pouring myself some orange juice. The market is volatile right now, he said with a practiced smile. Volatility is just another word for opportunity if you know how to ride the waves. He reached for a croissant. His sleeve rode up. The sunlight caught the face of his watch. It was a heavy gold chronograph with a distinctive blue dial. I recognized it immediately. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus. I knew it because I had looked at one for my retirement gift to myself and then decided that $45,000 was an obscene amount of money to spend on something that just told me I was running out of time. Nice watch, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Marcus pulled his sleeve down quickly, a reflex that was too fast to be casual. Oh, a little bonus for closing a merger last week. You know how it is. You have to look the part to get the part. I nodded, but my eyes drifted to the driveway. Parked behind Vanessa's sedan was a brand new SUV, a German model, pearl white. The dealer plates were still on it. And the car? I asked. Vanessa walked out of the sliding glass door carrying a fruit platter. Lease, she said quickly, cutting in before Marcus could speak. We got a fantastic deal. End of model year clearance, practically giving them away. Right? I said. Giving them away. I ate the organic berries. They tasted like ash. I looked at my daughter and her husband, and I did the mental math. Marcus's commission structure was decent, but not Patek Philippe, and German SUV decent. And Vanessa's salary as the foundation CEO was capped by the bylaws I had written myself. It was generous, but it was a salary meant for a public servant, not a hedge fund manager. The numbers didn't balance, and when the load doesn't match the structural capacity, things start to crack. The crack opened wide on a Tuesday. I was sorting through my mail, separating the junk from the bills, when I saw a familiar envelope. It was from Harbor Home, the shelter Thomas had loved the most. We had spent every Thanksgiving there for 20 years, serving turkey to people who had nothing. I opened it, expecting the usual quarterly newsletter. Instead, it was a personal letter from the director, a woman named Beatrice. Dear Lorraine, I wanted to write to you personally to express my gratitude for the years of support the Mitchell Foundation has provided. While we are devastated by the recent decision to cut our kitchen funding, we understand that priorities change. We are scrambling to find alternative donors to keep the breakfast program running for the children. But please know we hold no ill will. We hope that in the future we might align with your new vision. I read the paragraph 3 times. The words swam before my eyes. Cut our kitchen funding. Vanessa had just told me at lunch that the foundation was in its strongest financial position in a decade. She had shown me charts with arrows pointing up. She had bragged about expanding outreach. You don't expand outreach by cutting the food budget for hungry children. I walked into my study and pulled out the heavy ledger where I kept my own copies of the foundation's public filings. I turned on my computer and logged into the donor portal. I looked at the last reported grants. According to the portal, the grant to Harbor Home had been paid in full. I picked up the phone. I dialed the foundation's main line. The receptionist, a sweet girl named Molly, answered. Mitchell Foundation. How may I help you? Molly, it's Lorraine. Put me through to Vanessa. Oh, Mrs. Mitchell. Hi, she's in a strategy meeting right now. Can one now, Molly? There was a click and then hold music. A minute later, Vanessa's voice came on the line. She sounded breathless, annoyed. Mom, is everything okay? I'm in the middle of a deep dive with the marketing team. I just got a letter from Beatrice at Harbor Home, I said. My voice was low, steady, the kind of voice I used when a contractor told me the foundation specs were wrong. She says, you cut their funding. Silence, a long, heavy silence that stretched for 3 seconds. Mom, she sighed, the annoyance shifting to a patronizing tone. I was going to brief you on that next week. It's part of the strategic reallocation I told you about. We're shifting from passive aid like soup kitchens to active empowerment programs, vocational training, coding boot camps. It's about teaching someone to fish rather than just giving them a fish. Beatrice says the money was cut. The portal says it was paid. Which is it, Vanessa? The portal updates quarterly. Mom, it hasn't refreshed yet. Look, the money was reallocated to a new partner, Pinnacle Consulting. They're helping us set up the infrastructure for the training centers. It's an investment in infrastructure. You, of all people, should understand that. Pinnacle Consulting, I repeated. I've never heard of them. They're new, innovative. Look, I really have to go. Marcus and I are meeting with the Orion reps tonight to finalize the big deal. I'll explain everything at dinner on Sunday, okay? She hung up before I could answer. I sat there holding the receiver. Pinnacle Consulting, strategic teething problems. I put the phone down. I didn't go back to sorting the mail. I went to the closet and put on my coat. I wasn't an investigator, but I knew how to inspect a site, and right now I needed to inspect Pinnacle Consulting. I drove to the address listed on the Pinnacle Consulting invoice. I found in a digital dump of the Foundation's Public 990 form I managed to download. The address was in a corporate park on the edge of town. I expected a glass building, maybe a bustling office with hip young people sitting on beanbag chairs talking about synergy. What I found was a strip mall that had seen better days. There was a dry cleaner, a nail salon, and a store called Mailboxes, etc. I walked into the shipping store. The bell above the door jingled. A young woman with headphones around her neck looked up from her phone. "Help you. I'm looking for Suite 404, I said. "Pinnacle Consulting." The girl smirked. She turned around and pointed to a wall of small brass boxes. "Box 404 is right there, top row." I stared at the small metal door. It wasn't an office. It was a P.O. box. "Do you know who picks up the mail for that box?" I asked. "Can't tell you that, ma'am. Privacy policy." I walked out of the store. The tremor in my gut was now a full-blown earthquake. My daughter had moved $50,000, my $50,000, into a metal box in a strip mall next to a nail salon. I needed help. I needed someone who could see through walls. Jerome Patterson was the son of my old friend Beatrice Patterson from the shelter. He had taken over his mother's legal practice 5 years ago and had built it into one of the best boutique law firms in Chicago. He was sharp, terrifyingly efficient, and had zero patience for sentimentality. His office was a fortress of glass and steel in the financial district. I sat across from him, the letter from Harbor Home and the printout of the Pinnacle address on the desk between us. "It's a shell," Jerome said. He didn't even look up from the documents. A P.O. box in a strip mall is the classic signature of a shell company. Amateur hour. "Vanessa said it was for infrastructure," I said, defending her out of habit, even though I knew it was a lie. "Lorraine?" Jerome looked at me over his reading glasses. "I've known Vanessa since we were kids. She's smart, but she's not this sloppy. If she's moving money to a shell, there's a reason. We need to see the books, not the public filings, the internal ledger. I don't have access. I stepped down from the board 3 years ago." Jerome tapped his pen on the desk. "You're the founder. You have emeritus status. The bylaws state you have the right to audit in the event of a perceived crisis of confidence. I think a cut to the flagship charity qualifies. I don't want to destroy her, Jerome. I just want to know if she's in trouble. Maybe someone is pressuring her. Maybe she made a mistake and is trying to cover it up. Or maybe she's stealing from you," Jerome said brutally. "Give me 24 hours. I have a forensic accountant on retainer who can legally request a preliminary compliance review without triggering a full board vote. It's a soft audit. We'll see what shakes loose." "Do it," I said. The next morning, I was back in Jerome's office. He looked grim. He turned a monitor toward me. "We got into the server logs," he said. "We found a report. It was generated 2 weeks ago by an external security firm. Cybersecurity. According to this report, the Foundation was hit by a ransomware attack last month, a sophisticated phishing scheme. They claim hackers gained access to the operating accounts and siphoned off nearly $200,000. I felt a wave of relief so profound it almost made me dizzy. "Hackers," I breathed. "She didn't steal it. It was stolen from her." Jerome frowned. "That's what the report says. It claims the money sent to Pinnacle and other entities was actually routed by the malware to offshore accounts in Eastern Europe. Vanessa isn't the thief. She's the victim. She's probably trying to hide the hack to prevent the donors from panicking while she tries to fix it." "That explains the 50,000, I said, connecting the dots. "She needed liquidity to fill the hole the hackers left so Orion wouldn't find out. She's trying to save the ship." "It fits," Jerome admitted, "but something bothers me. The security firm that wrote this report, SecureNet Digital, I've never heard of them." "I don't care." I stood up. "If my daughter is being blackmailed or robbed by cybercriminals, I'm not going to sit here looking at spreadsheets. I'm going to help her." "Lorraine, wait, let me run a background check on SecureNet." "You do that. I'm going to find out where these attacks came from." For the next 3 days, I was a woman on a mission. I was convinced I was saving my family from an invisible digital enemy. I called in a favor from an old colleague who worked in telecom infrastructure. I showed him the IP addresses listed in the SecureNet report. "These trace back to a server farm in New Jersey," he told me. "It's a colocation facility. Massive place, thousands of servers. Can we find out who owns the specific rack, not without a warrant, or if you know someone who works maintenance there? I didn't know someone, but I knew how to talk to engineers. I drove to New Jersey. It was a 3-hour drive. I spent the whole time imagining Vanessa's relief when I told her I had tracked down the thieves. I got to the data center. It was a fortress. I spent 6 hours waiting in the lobby trying to talk to the facility manager, flashing my credentials as a structural engineer, making up a story about a potential load-bearing issue in the cooling system just to get a foot in the door. It was exhausting, desperate work. I was 68 years old, arguing with a 25-year-old security guard who looked at me like I was senile. Finally, I got the manager to look up the IP allocation. He did it just to get me to leave. "Look, ma'am," the manager said, turning his screen away. "That block of IPs isn't Eastern European hackers. It's a private lease, a dedicated line." "Leased to who?" I demanded. "I can't give you a name." "A company." "Then just give me the company." He sighed. "It's leased to a holding company called Pinnacle Consulting." The world stopped spinning. "Pinnacle?" I whispered. "Yeah. They pay for the premium package. High-speed trading setup. Looks very secure." I walked out of the data center. The cool New Jersey air hit my face, but I was already freezing. There were no hackers. The cyber attack report was a forgery, a fake document planted in the files in case anyone looked too closely, a decoy to send an old woman chasing ghosts while the real thieves sat at her dinner table eating her food. Pinnacle wasn't the hacker. Pinnacle was Vanessa, and Pinnacle was Marcus. I drove back to the city in a trance. When I got to Jerome's office, it was dark. I banged on the door until the cleaning crew let me in. Jerome was still at his desk, surrounded by takeout boxes. "It's fake," I said, standing in his doorway. "The hacking report, it's a lie." Jerome nodded slowly. He didn't look surprised. "I know. I checked SecureNet Digital. The website was registered 3 weeks ago. The domain owner, Marcus Webb." He threw a file on the desk. "And I found something else. The strategic real. It's a funnel. They aren't just skimming off the top, Lorraine. They are gutting the place. The endowment fund, the money you put in when you sold your architectural firm. It's gone. All of it. They've liquidated 80% of the portfolio. They're moving it through Pinnacle, then washing it through a series of crypto exchanges, and finally dumping it into an account in the Cayman Islands." I sank into the chair. "Why? They have good lives. They have money. Greed doesn't have a ceiling, Lorraine. But here's the kicker. They're accelerating. The withdrawals are getting bigger and more frequent. It looks like they're cashing out." "Cashing out means they're planning to leave," I said. "Exactly. And there's one big asset left on the books. The Riverside Grove." My heart stopped. The Riverside Grove was 20 acres of pristine forest on the edge of the county. Thomas had bought it 20 years ago. He wanted it to be a permanent nature preserve for the city's children. It was holy ground. "They can't sell the grove," I said. "It's in the charter." "They can if the board votes that the land is financially distressed and a burden on the foundation." Jerome pulled out another document. "I found a draft motion. They're planning to sell it to a developer called Lakeside Properties. The sale price is listed at $3 million. That land is worth 10. I snapped. "Exactly. So why sell for 3 unless the buyer is paying another $5 million under the table directly to the Cayman's account?" I stood up. The grief was gone. The confusion was gone. In their place was a cold, sharp anger. It was the feeling of finding a structural flaw that was so negligent it was criminal. "They're selling Thomas's Grove," I said. "Lorraine, we need hard evidence of the kickback. The digital trail is good, but it's circumstantial. We need the smoking gun. We need the actual correspondence or the original invoices before they were doctored." "Marcus has a private office," I said. "Not at the foundation. A trading space he rents downtown. He bragged about it once, said it was his command center. You can't just walk in there." "I don't have to walk in," I said. "I designed that building in 2002. I know how to get into the mechanical corridors." 2 nights later, I was standing in the alley behind Bennett Plaza. I was wearing dark clothes and carrying a small toolkit. I looked like any other maintenance worker. I used a master key I had kept for 20 years, a sentimental keepsake that was now a weapon, to open the service entrance. It still worked. Good design lasts. I took the freight elevator to the 14th floor. Marcus's office was 1 for B. The hallway was quiet. The carpet absorbed my footsteps. I reached the door. It had a smart lock, the kind that required a key card or a code. I didn't have the code, but I knew that the doorframe in this building had a vulnerability. The strike plates were installed a quarter-inch too deep, allowing a shim to bypass the latch if you applied pressure to the bottom hinge. It was a flaw I had argued with the contractor about in 2002. He never fixed it. I pulled a putty knife from my bag. I wedged it in. I pushed the bottom of the door. Click. I was in. The office was a shrine to Marcus's ego. Leather furniture, a humidor, and a wall of monitors. I went straight to the desk. Locked. I used a tension wrench to pick it. Simple tumbler lock. I had learned the basics from a locksmith friend years ago. Inside the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of financial magazines, was a black binder. I opened it. It was the Holy Grail. It contained the real invoices, not the pinnacle ones. Invoices for consulting services from Lakeside Properties, emails printed out discussing the facilitation fee for the Riverside Grove sale, bank routing numbers for the Cayman account. It was all here. I pulled out a portable hard drive I had brought. I plugged it into Marcus's desktop computer. I needed to back up the digital files, too, just in case. I started the transfer. The progress bar crawled. 10%, 20%. Then, I heard the elevator ding. I froze. Voices in the hallway, loud, urgent. I told you tomorrow is too late. We need to sign the papers on Saturday. It was Marcus, and I told you, my mother is asking questions. Vanessa's voice. She went to New Jersey. Marcus, she's sniffing around. Let her sniff. By the time she figures it out, we'll be on a plane to Zurich. Just get her to the dinner. We signed the land deal. The wire hits, and we're gone. They were coming to the office. I yanked the hard drive out. The transfer was only at 60%, but I had the binder. I looked around. There was no back exit, only a utility closet. I dove into the closet just as the office door beeped and opened. I held my breath. I was pressed against a server rack, the heat humming against my back. Through the louvered vent, I could see them. Marcus was pacing. We moved the sale up. Tell Lakeside we sign tomorrow night. Tomorrow? That's Friday. Mom thinks the dinner is next week. Change the dinner. Tell her we got a reservation at Summit Room. Tell her it's a celebration for her help with Orion. She's sentimental. She swallow it. Don't talk about her like that, Vanessa snapped. Then she softened. But okay, I'll call her. They stayed for 10 minutes. 10 minutes that felt like 10 years. My back was aching. I clutched the black binder to my chest like a shield. Finally, they left. I waited 5 minutes, then burst out of the closet. I had to get out. I ran to the stairwell. I didn't wait for the elevator. I hit the stairs, taking them as fast as I dared. My knees protested, but adrenaline is a powerful thing. I reached the lobby level. I pushed the door open and ran straight into a security guard. Hey, who are you? He shouted, reaching for his radio. I didn't stop. I pushed past him, bursting out the side door into the alley. Stop. I ran down the alley, clutching the bag with the binder. It was raining now. The pavement was slick. I turned the corner, my shoes slipping on wet concrete. I stumbled. The bag swung wild. The zipper, which I hadn't closed all the way in my panic, gave way. The portable hard drive, the digital evidence, slid out. It hit the wet pavement and skittered across the alley straight toward a storm drain. No, I lunged for it. My fingers brushed the plastic casing just as it tipped over the edge. Plop! It fell into the dark. Rushing water below, I lay there on the wet pavement, gasping for air. I had lost the digital backups. I had lost the recordings of their conversation. But I patted the bag, the binder, the paper. I still had the binder. It's not enough, Jerome said the next morning. He was pacing his office. The binder is great, Lorraine, but without the digital chain of custody, a good defense lawyer, and Marcus will hire the best, could argue these are forgeries. They could say you planted them. You broke into his office. For God's sake, they're real. I slammed the binder on the table. I know they are, but we need to corner them. We need them to admit it, or we need to catch them in the act of the sale. They moved the sale, I said. Tomorrow night at Summit Room. Jerome stopped pacing. Summit Room. That's the most expensive restaurant in the city. Marcus likes an audience, I said. He wants to celebrate his victory, looking down on the world. If they sign that land sale contract, Jerome said, the property transfers instantly. Even if we sue later, the developers will bulldoze that grove on Monday morning just to establish use. Once the trees are down, they're down. We have to stop the vote, I said. You're not on the board. No, but Dorothy and Franklin are. Dorothy Pierce and Franklin Hayes were the other two board members. They were old friends. They trusted Vanessa because they trusted me. They won't believe you without proof, Jerome said. They've known Vanessa since she was a baby. Then I won't just tell them, I said. I'll show them. I drove Dorothy and Franklin out to the Riverside Grove that afternoon. I didn't say a word during the drive. I parked the car at the trailhead. Lorraine, why are we here? Dorothy asked, wrapping her coat tighter. It's freezing. Walk with me. I led them 100 yards into the tree line. The oaks were turning gold. It was beautiful. Then we saw it, staked into the ground, hidden behind a thicket of bushes so it wouldn't be seen from the road, was a surveyor's sign. Future site of Lakeside Estates. Luxury condominiums coming spring 2026. Franklin stared at the sign. He wiped his glasses. I don't understand. We never voted on this. You didn't, I said. But tomorrow night at dinner, Vanessa is going to ask you to sign a routine administrative motion to modernize the asset portfolio. She won't tell you it's for this. She'll tell you it's for the Orion deal. She wouldn't, Dorothy whispered. This is Thomas's place. I opened the black binder on the hood of my car. I showed them the emails, the facilitation fee, the Cayman account. I watched their faces change. It was the same change I had gone through: denial, confusion, and then heartbreak hardening into fury. She's selling us out, Franklin said, his voice shaking, for a condo development. She's selling Thomas out, Dorothy said. She looked at me. What do? We go to dinner, I said. I called Vanessa an hour later. I made my voice sound shaky, old. Mom, she answered on the first ring. Did you get the invite? Summit room tomorrow at 7. I got it, sweetheart, I said. I'm so proud of you. The Orion deal, you really pulled it off. I did it for you, Mom. She lied. And for Dad. I want to do something special, I said. I want to sign the final papers myself. I know I'm not on the board, but as a ceremonial gesture, can you bring the land documents to the dinner? I want to toast the future. There was a pause. She was calculating. Did she suspect? Of course, Mom, she said. That's a beautiful idea. We'll bring everything. She took the bait. Summit room was on the 60th floor. Glass walls, white linen, and a view that made the cars below look like toys. I arrived an hour early. I spoke to the motor D. I paid him $500 to lock the private dining room doors once the service started. Family privacy, I told him. I set the table. I placed the cutlery. I checked the site. I wasn't setting a table. I was preparing a demolition site. I needed the charges placed exactly right. At 7 p.m., Vanessa and Marcus walked in. They looked magnificent. Vanessa in a burgundy silk dress, Marcus in a bespoke suit. They looked like winners. They looked like they owned the city. Mom. Vanessa kissed my cheek. She smelled of expensive perfume and anxiety. Lorraine. Marcus shook my hand. His grip was firm, clammy. What a view. Huh. Fitting for the occasion. Sit, I said. Please. They sat. They ordered champagne. They were giddy. So, Marcus said, checking his watch. Let's get the paperwork signed. We have an early flight tomorrow. A little victory lap in Zurich. Zurich, I said. Nice this time of year. Banking capital of the world. Marcus smiled. Right? I smiled back. Before we sign, I have a surprise. I nodded to the waiter. He opened the side door. Dorothy and Franklin walked in. They weren't smiling. They were dressed in dark clothes like they were attending a funeral. Dorothy, Franklin, Vanessa stood up, confused. What are you doing here? Mom invited us, Franklin said. Vanessa looked at me. Mom, I thought this was just family. It is, I said. Dorothy and Franklin are family. And since you need a board quorum to sign the land deal, I thought I'd save you the trouble of faxing them later. Vanessa's smile faltered. Right, of course. Well, great, let's get it done. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sleek blue folder. The contract. Here it is, she said, sliding it across the table. The authorization for the asset transfer. Just sign on the last page. Franklin picked up the folder. He didn't open it. He just held it. Asset transfer, Franklin said. Is that what we call it now? It's technical language, Franklin, Marcus said smoothly. Standard stuff, like Pinnacle Consulting. I asked. The room went dead silent. The clink of a fork against a plate sounded like a gunshot. Marcus froze. What? I reached under the table and pulled out the black binder. I slammed it onto the white tablecloth. It was heavy. It landed with a thud that rattled the wine glasses. Pinnacle Consulting, I said, opening it to the first page. A shell company registered to a P.O. box. The same P.O. box where you sent my $50,000. Mom, you don't understand, Vanessa stammered. That was the hackers. The cyber attack from SecureNet Digital, I asked. The company whose website was registered by Marcus Webb 3 weeks ago. I turned the page, and here's the IP log from the data center in New Jersey. The one I visited, the one leased to Pinnacle. Marcus stood up. This is entrapment. You broke into my office. I inspected a building I designed. I corrected him, and I found structural rot. I turned to the section on the Riverside Grove, and this, I pointed to the email printout. Email from Lakeside Properties to Marcus Webb. Subject, facilitation fee. $2 million United States dollars to be wired to Cayman Holdings upon signature of deed. I looked at Dorothy. They aren't modernizing the assets, Dorothy. They're selling the Grove for condos, and they're pocketing $2 million for the privilege. Vanessa sank back into her chair. She looked small. The power, the poise, the CEO facade, it all crumbled. Mom, she whispered, please, we were in debt. Marcus made some bad calls. We were going to lose the house. We just needed a way out. So, you stole from the hungry. Dorothy's voice was shaking with rage. You stole from the homeless to pay for your German SUV, for your watch. It was a loan, Marcus shouted. We were going to pay it back. With what? I asked. With the money from selling your father's legacy. I stood up. I picked up the blue folder, the land contract. This meeting is now called to order, I said. Motion to terminate Vanessa Webb as CEO for cause. Motion to strip Marcus Webb of all vendor privileges. Motion to refer this evidence to the district attorney. Seconded, Dorothy said immediately. All in favor. Aye, Dorothy said. Aye, Franklin said. The motion carries, I said. I looked at the contract in my hands. The contract that would have turned my husband's sanctuary into a parking lot. I walked over to the table's centerpiece, a large open flame candle. No, Marcus gasped. Don't. I held the corner of the contract to the flame. The paper caught instantly. The fire curled up, blackening the legal jargon, eating the signatures. I held it until the heat burned my fingertips. Then I dropped the burning pages onto the bread plate. We watched it burn. It's over, I said. You can't do this, Marcus hissed. We have rights. You have the right to remain silent. Jerome's voice came from the doorway. I turned. Jerome Patterson walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. I took the liberty of forwarding the binder contents to the DA this morning, Jerome said. Turns out wire fraud across state lines is a serious offense, and fleeing the country to Zurich, that makes you a flight risk. The officers moved in. Vanessa Webb, Marcus Webb, the officer said. Please stand up. Vanessa looked at me. Her eyes were filled with tears, but I saw no remorse, only terror at the consequences. Mom, she sobbed. Help me. I looked at her. I saw the little girl I had taught to draw blueprints, but I also saw the woman who had taken food out of the mouths of children. I did help you, I said softly. I stopped you from doing something you could never come back from. I saved your soul, Vanessa, but I can't save your lifestyle. They were handcuffed. They were led out of the restaurant, past the stunned diners, past the waiters. The door closed. The room was quiet. The contract was a pile of ash on the plate. Dorothy took a drink of her wine. Her hand was trembling. We have a lot of work to do, Lorraine. Yes, I said. We have to rebuild. We have to reinforce the foundation. And we have to start laying new groundwork. 6 months later, I stood on the ridge overlooking the Riverside Grove. The air was crisp. The leaves were gone, but the structure of the trees was beautiful against the gray sky. It was done. The foundation had been audited, scrubbed, and relaunched. Dorothy was serving as interim director. The scandal had been news for a week, then forgotten, as scandals always are. But the land remained. A new sign was up at the trailhead. Not a developer sign. The Thomas Mitchell Memorial Park. Open to all. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. I had lost a daughter. I knew I would visit her in prison eventually. I would put money in her commissary account. I would still be her mother, but I would never be her victim again. I touched the rough bark of an oak tree. We held the line. Thomas, I whispered, but the foundation held. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the tremor. The ground was solid. The building would stand. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.